Hello, and welcome. What I'm discussing in this video is the idea of breaking the habit of being yourself. I've been listening to the book by Joe Dispenza of that title most recently, and it's been a joy. It's something that I've been playing on my walks and every time I'm exercising and when I'm cooking, and it is a wealth of information. He's discussing the idea of how we create these patterns in our lives, and they're based on our habits. And when we get into those modes, by the time we are about 32 years old, we are solidified in a specific personality that if we don't put active intentional effort towards, we do not break. So many of us are on autopilot from being 32 years old and on with how we think, how we react to things, what we feel about our past, how we feel about the people in our environments or whatever. And we're not able to see outside of it because we're such on this specific program that we don't even know how to break it. So I love the title. It talks about breaking the habit of being yourself because many of us want to create new things in our lives. We want to have new experiences. We want to have new mindsets when it comes to what we want to create at any given time. And I think what a lot of people deal with is the roadblock of themselves, the roadblock of their conditioned way of thinking and their conditioned way of being. So if we're thinking about something I love it. This is one of my favorites, relationships, right? Being in relationships. So many people are very conditioned to dependent solely on themselves and dependent solely on their own emotional abilities, their own financial abilities, their own physical, whatever it is, they're solely, and it mostly comes from not being able to depend on other people in either their childhood or some events in their lives and that sort of thing. And this is not to say anything is wrong with that, but when you get into the space of every time you are approached with a situation to where a relationship has the ability, and if it's a healthy one, because some are not healthy, but if it's a healthy one, it has the ability to go further. It has the ability to help you connect with someone on a deeper level, help you depend on someone emotionally, on a deeper level, depend on them financially, possibly on a deeper level. We may be programmed to sort of pull back as soon as those moments actually hit. I know I'm guilty of this myself because my programming and the habit of being me is so steeped in the idea of this is how I do it. This is how my life goes. This is what works. This is what I like to experience. So the idea of someone else coming in and sort of taking it off that track or pushing that pattern around, it becomes really scary because in my brain, with my mind, it doesn't feel safe. Because sometimes we're still operating in a survival mode, even though we're not hustling around and trying to make things happen. When we go deeper into those feelings and we pull back those layers, there's a survival mode in many areas of our lives. So you may be operating in survival mode with relationships, even if you didn't even notice that was going on, because most of the relationships, they stay surface for a while. When they get to be 2 to 3 years, maybe possibly they start going a little bit deeper. When they go a little bit deeper, that's when that fight or flight kind of, reaction kind of kicks in. It's like, hey, you're uncovering, you're trying to tap into too many of my patterns and programs, and I'm going to reject this, right? It's kind of like if you're using a computer or you're using a specific type of phone and you try to do something on it that it's not programmed to do, right? Somebody was asking me the other day why I don't use, nobody was asking me. I was just sharing why I don't use iPhones. It's because I've been using technology for a very, very long time. And I'm really big about doing what I want to do with any device that I have. And a phone for me is like a computer. I use it for almost everything. And so whenever I did use an iPhone, it always stopped me from doing things all the time because there was a pattern of behavior and programs that it's set up to do. And when I was trying to come in and say, but I want to do this, but I want to add this, I want to take this away, it was always block, 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 block. And that's how some of us are. So you can do things on the surface level, but when you go a little bit deeper and try to change things on that device, you're not allowed to do it. And some of us are just like programmed devices. We're walking around and we have this specific way of being that we can give and take with on a certain level. And then when it goes to the deepest levels, it's not an option. It's kind of like having a free version of like a website builder. It lets you change the colors. It might let you change the font, right? But if you haven't gotten past that paywall, that deeper programming, then it's not going to let you change the HTML behind it. It's not going to let you change the way the page is configured, right? And that's essentially what we're wanting to do with ourselves. And then we wonder why we keep on going down the same paths. We can do the same thing with our finances. I can tell you, getting on the other side of that is very painful sometimes, because for a long time I managed my finances in a very lackadaisical, whimsy kind of way. It's like, oh, it's happening. Whatever's going to happen. It's like there was nothing on paper. There was nothing really organized. It's like, oh, it's going to happen. And I was around someone at the time that I had to sit down and itemize everything that I had debt in and everything that I had to pay and what my exact income is. And I had to be really specific about it because that's what we were doing. And when I tell you, I cried like a baby. And this wasn't very long ago. This is probably like 5 years ago. I mean, I cried like a baby. I boohoo cried because it felt so painful to get outside of the pattern of being having whimsy when it comes to my finances and how they operate. Now, I didn't completely get away from the whimsy of it, but now I know exactly how much whimsy is there and not overstepping the whimsy that's available, right? While I'm still manifesting more. And then more still shows up. But at the same time, I'm not in this mode of, always, ooh, I wonder what's happening there. Is it enough? Did I have enough? I know exactly where things at, 99% of the time. And I sat there and I cried because I had never put myself in a position of changing that pattern of thinking and changing that pattern of being. I was raised in it. That's how I was brought up to believe about money. You get a lump sum and you work from there. You didn't organize your finances on a weekly or bi-weekly or a monthly basis. That was just way too much structure, right? And so that my mindset kind of carried over from that. But it was not working for me. And the reason why I was sitting there and getting it done is because I knew I had to break the habit of being myself. I knew that if I was myself any longer in that area, I was never going to see the progress that I wanted to see. And so many of us are dealing with these things that we have to dig back a few more layers with, because we have these permanent aspects of our personalities that are, I'll call them semi-permanent, like when you do hair dye and it's semi-permanent, because eventually it can be washed out, It's like semi-permanent aspects of who we are, but we don't know how to get on the other side. And getting on the other side can be scary. It literally feels like somebody is going to physically harm you when you're just being mentally and emotionally attacked by yourself. It's like your body and brain is saying, no, this is the way we've always done it. This is the way it's always been. This is the way it's got to be. And you're having to step in and say, no, it can be better. I can do more. I can create more. I can expand. I can grow and I can learn. Right? Because you'll start, if you look around at many things in your life, anything where you can see a pattern that you do not like, there's an area where you've created habits and routines around it that you're having a hard time breaking to get to the other side of it. Something I most recently started working on was snacking on chips and candy and all that at night. And it's still weighing on me, because I was laying there last night thinking it sure would be nice to have some Cheetos. But I'm like, no, you're breaking that habit and it's not going to be overnight. And now it's been almost a month and it's still popped in my head. So it's not an easy journey. And we can make all kinds of reasonings and conceptualize it over and over again of why we do something or why it has to be a certain way. But ultimately, it's just programming. And we know it when we get afraid. We know it when we feel fear. We know it when we don't want to think about something because it's just too much and we have to just move on and go do something else. That's how you know you're touching one of those patterns. When you get that feeling of, I just can't think about that today. Or, something's making you feel fearful, or anxiety comes, or it's a thought that keeps haunting you of something that you need to work on or take care of. You know that you're tapping into those patterns that don't want to be shaken when that's your reaction. So if you get a chance, that book by Joe Dispenza, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, is much more magical when it comes to the intellectual breakdown of how it happens. My little description is kind of just a synopsis of what I gathered from it, but you may listen to it and gather something completely different. But I think books like those are necessities because it shows you that there's a really specific scientific process that's happening in your brain. There's certain chemicals that are being released. There's, a DNA aspect to it. There's also genetics at play when it comes to it. And if we don't understand how that works, then we find ourselves in exact positions that are not positive that our parents were in because we never did break that habit of being ourselves. And so it talks about genetics and how everything doesn't have to carry over. And we think, oh, my mom was like this or my dad was like this, so that's why I'm like this. Well, it's your habits and your behaviors and your patterns that are taking you down the same road as they did because you are mimicking the behavior that they had and you're doing the same exact routines and habits and patterns that they did. But if you can break the habit of being yourself, then you can break those generational curses, I like to call, that's what people call them, but those generational mishaps to where you are creating fresh and clean and you're deciding what type of finances, you're deciding what type of health regimens you're going to have, you're deciding what type of relationships you're going to have in your life, right? Anyway, breaking the habit of being yourself. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.